job's in the bag, I've got a dream. From one small town to the next.
All right, well, good morning,
tee
everybody,
box,
and
a
I am
life
very
on the
fortunate to have
road.
my good friend Robert Mills join me this morning. But before I get to why I'm very thrilled to have Robert join me, this is our Golfers, Golf, and Travel segment. And the reason I'm putting this podcast there is because golfers do golf, but people do travel. And our whole team at the Live Eco Style and Distillery Channel Media Company have been all over the world and still are, except for Robert. Thankfully, came home a couple nights ago and came down off the mountain. And we're going to get to an amazing, exciting story that is going to unfold here in the next hour or so. Anyway, Robert Mills, how are y'all?
I'm fine, Randy. I'm always delighted to be with you on this wonderful podcast with all your interesting guests and sharing it with me and the world. And happy to be here.
Well, I appreciate you taking your Saturday morning to do this. Now, here's what happened. Robert is a very elite mountain climber. He has climbed 56 of the top 57 highest mountains in the United States, and he was looking this past week, and he had planned to go climb Mount Whitney, which he did. And it was, we were going to have a podcast from the top of Mount Whitney, which was going to be, probably still is, 14,505 feet. And I became very concerned because I don't believe weather forecasts, and I live just west of Chicago. And Robert, when you're climbing the side of an icy mountain, was relying on forecasts to, thinking he was going to get to the top. Well, let's find out what happened. I'll put it this way. I was really concerned 48 hours ago that we would have a podcast with Mr. Mills sitting alongside me. It's just one of those things that when you're over 28 years old and you're climbing the side of a mountain, it gets harrowing. So we're going to unfold this story. And Robert, let's just start with, do you have any bruises, dents, anything you left on top of the mountain, any DNA that they might find saying you were there?
Well, I'm having a hard time sitting here for this podcast because if you can see my backside, it's and I've got an elbow. I was what happened to go right to the event is I went to climb Mount Whitney. I climbed it three times before. I sent you the pictures of me three times on the summit. And it's an absolutely gorgeous, magnificent mountain. It is, and the Smithsonian Institution decided that they were going to put up an astrophysics research station on the summit of Mount Whitney, and they did. And they dynamited a tremendous trail up to the summit, quite steep in places and built this structure. It's the highest structure, permanent structure in the whole United States. And there's a movement to make it a National Historic Monument. And it still sits there, and I have sent you a picture of it, a little tiny stone hut. And so I was going up there. There's different routes on all these mountains. And of course, on Whitney, there is one on the backside and this one that is trails, and you could ride a horse to the top. So it's not a hand over hand rope kind of thing. Now, of course, there are hand over hand and rope routes up Mount Whitney, and they're climbed. And I did not go that route. And I used what I call the geezer route. It was just a walk. It's 11 miles up, 11 and a half miles up from the parking lot at the Whitney portal at the trailhead, all the way to the summit. And I've done it before, and it's a very popular mountain. It's extremely popular because of this. And also, it's the highest mountain in the continental United States, which makes it a huge magnet for people. About 50 miles north, not even 50 miles north, is Mount Williamson. It's 14,390 feet. So it's just a little shorter, but it's number two. And it gets virtually no traffic because it's number two. Okay, that's an interesting psychological. I climbed Williamson, and it's much harder. I mean, it's a 34-mile round trip, and it's 10,500 feet up. And I climbed it, and I didn't see anybody on. It was just me up there. And now Whitney, in contrast to that, 30,000 people start out to climb this mountain every single year. And because of this number, they had to do something. So what they did is they required you to get a permit for it. and put the permits on a lottery system because there was too many. And it's a wonderful idea because it preserves a wilderness experience for people. It keeps it from being hundreds of people on a long line. Like that picture you saw of Mount Everest with people just lined up.
Yeah.
You don't want the experience up there. And so the National Forest Service came up with this plan. It's a wonderful plan to issue permits, and you apply for them on the date. They get a lottery, and they give some people a permit, and some people, I'm sorry, and but they end the permit system, the quota system. They're not the permit system. They end the quota system on November the 1st every year. Why? Because nobody wants to climb it. Then it's cold up there, and there's snow, and and only so you don't you can apply and you'll get a permit, and you ask for it, and you print it and you bring it with you, and there's no limitations on it. But every year 30,000 people set out, only 10,000 make it. Why?
Oh,
Because, well, first of all, it's 11 and a half miles, and a lot of people are not prepared for that. But the real big thing is altitude. People have never often experienced what it's like physiologically to go from sea level or near sea level to 14,500 feet. And what happens is that, they get altitude sickness, severe altitude sickness. And so 2/3 of them fail. And when I'm climbing, even when I'm doing it in November, sometimes I see people double them. You can look at pictures of them, and they're throwing up, and they're sick, and they're fainting, and and so what I do when I climb Mount Whitney is, I go to Mammoth Mountain Inn, which is this beautiful inn in Mammoth Mountain where the ski resort is, about hour and a half drive north, and I book a room there, which my kind partner Eric and I did, um, at 9,000 feet, the resort,
wow.
and we have dinner, and relax, and we spend the night in on a bed in the hotel. It's a terrific inn, and then next morning we drive right down to Mount Whitney Portal where the trailhead is, and we climb up to 10,300 feet to a place called Outpost Camp, which is this gorgeous little flat sandy place with streams running all through it from waterfalls coming down with these 3 or 4 thousand foot cliffs on all sides, and you have these beautiful red fir trees, and it's flat there, so you could put a camp there. So we did that, and I sent you pictures of it, of the tent there, and I
So
camped there.
when you camp there, how many people are at that spot? How many campers are there? Just very few.
There was originally there was one person, and then a couple of others showed up. But it's a big area, and I'm right underneath this beautiful frozen waterfall that was partially frozen. You hear the sound of it all night. It's really a wonderful
So if you say
sound.
they issue 30,000 permits a year and you have 10 months, they have 3,000 people a month or 1,000 people a day going up. Is that right?
Uh, they issue the 30,000 permits, and so you got over a period of maybe that's about 5 month period,
Yeah.
uh, divided up over five. It's 150 days, and you divide that by the 30,000. It's a lot of people going up there, so
Yeah, a couple thousand
it's
people a day. That's a lot.
uh 50, 150,
Yeah,
no, because
right.
150, 1,000 a day would be 150,000.
Oh,
uh,
that's right. My math is all wrong. I'm sorry. Fuzzy math. Do Saturday morning. Yeah.
We can do the math here, but it's there are people up there, and
Yeah.
so one of the interesting things I'll share with you and the public here, which is because is that there was a little problem with human waste from that many people.
Huh.
It's 60,000 pounds a year or something, and so that was just not going to work. And so the National Forest Service, in their wisdom, required everybody to pack out their own waste. Okay,
Wow.
you have to, and they issue free bags. They're called WAG bags. And so people who climb this mountain must take their waste out. And this is a wonderful, wonderful thing. I mean, it's a little awkward and it's a little, but this is what humans do, and this is life, okay? And
Right.
so what they did by doing that is they eliminated this problem, which was becoming a real problem, and it made the whole thing less ecky, and it was really a great idea because your people are confined to this narrow area in large volumes, and this fixed the problem. So So they on November the 1st every year I apply, not every year, but I've recently done it because it's there's very few people there then. And yeah, it's cold, but it's really it's a shoulder season, as they call it, before the big storms come.
Right.
And the last three times I've done it, the trails were clear. It was before the first big permanent storm, the big dump. And winter is very jealous of this mountain top up there, and it wants to reclaim its kingdom. And sometime in November, it does that, and you have this big dump, and then you really can't climb it after that because of the risk of avalanches, which become very serious. The snow comes down, you also need a snowshoes. It's just impossible to climb it without
So,
swinging
so the
your.
first night you spent in a motel hotel, then your second night, are you at this base camp? Just
Yeah, no, it's the second night. I'm in the interim camp. It's called Outpost Camp at 10,300, and it's a gorgeous little spot there with these red fir trees and you see these towering mountains. And then the next night I climb up to 12,000 feet to a place called Trail Camp, and it's a barren, way above the timberline, just rock and snow. And there's a little stream coming down into a lake there, a tiny lake. And I went over to the stream and filter water with these filters to take out any kind of disease or anything in it. And then that's our water. And so we set up camps there, and I got pictures of it. And you can see Mount Whitney above it, and this vast granite cathedral is just utterly gorgeous. And the full moon comes up, and it's just breathtakingly beautiful.
so
And so
just as a weird question. So you're getting water out of the stream at the end of summer. Obviously, it's still from snow melt from the year before in the crevices, or where is that water coming from? I mean, that's an interesting. You're at 12,000 feet, right? And that's what
Right,
you.
we're 12,000 feet, and there is still drifts of snow from the previous year, and it has rained a couple times up there during thunderstorms in the summer, and it gets down in there and moves on down. And then when I got there this time, of course, there had been this previous really significant dump of snow. There'd been a 3.5 foot snowfall 2 weeks earlier, and that's the one that hit me up on Agassiz, about 50 miles,
Okay.
60 miles north. And also the forecast was wrong there as well. I get up the climb it was supposed to come on Wednesday and it came on Tuesday. And then they said, so I was set to climb, went up on Sunday. And I'm according to this forecast, it's good for Monday. And so I was going to go up and wake up Monday morning in a blizzard. And that blizzard snow was still there, and that was really making the creeks go. And so you have a freeze thaw cycle at that elevation this time of the year, and it gets above freezing daytime, and then it freezes again at night, and it goes back and forth, and so you have the waterfalls starting to freeze, and at night the temperature's going down, 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 and before the end of this month, there's going to be a big dump, and it's going to be cold enough to not melt until July before will come out again. So it was a wonderful little shoulder moment here in November, historically, that I've been able to climb the mountain without having to address that at all. I just went up the trail, and it was cold, but it wasn't that cold. It was 20s, maybe teens at night. But during the day, sometimes we get above freezing. And if you're bundled up and you're going uphill, that's not cold. So that was what I did this time. My partner and I went up and we set up our camp at 12,000 feet in this magnificent place. And then we set out. Well, the wind came up. Okay, it was been still for days and beautiful, and ferocious winds came up, and they shook the tent, and it was horrendous. I mean, it was 60-mile-an-hour plus winds, and it was so extreme that they broke the tent pole in my partner's tent. And
Oh,
it was up at night, slapping and carrying on, just raging this wind. So I was, am I going to do this? And so he says,
so
look,
what? So what did he do when his tent broke? Did he come
he
join you
went down.
in your
He
tent?
said, look, I can't make it. I can't do the tent's broken, but I don't want you to miss this. So he generously said, here he had brought the stove up, and here keep the stove to make yourself, and I'm going to take my tent apart, and I'm going to go down. You go ahead and do the solo. You've done it before. You go ahead and make the summit, and I'll go down and I'll wait for you at the trade center. That's very generous of him.
I got to have a talk with your wife. At this point in time, you're close to being grounded in my world. But go ahead. This
So
is
So
The
he gets up.
insanity factor is now hitting my forehead. Oh, I'm Robert Mills. I'm going alone. Not a problem. All
Oh,
right.
I've done it, 3 times. You see me up there 3 times. It actually happened once earlier with a partner who got altitude sick, and I said, look, you're not, don't do this. I'll take your stuff down. You go ahead and go on down, and I'll climb and come right down. And so I went up to the summit, came back down, broke my camp and his camp, put it all on my backpack, and hiked all the way down to the car in that one day. And he drove me home. So what we did here was, he said, you just gotta walk up the trail, And so he goes down and says, go up. And so I spend that night, so I get up and he leaves and I head up the trail. Now, the forecast, I had 3 different forecasts, and they were forecasting wind going down from originally 35. And it went down. They said we're coming down to 30. So it's going to be 30-mile-an-hour winds on the summit. And, that's windy, but it's not dangerous. It's just real windy. And so I think, well, I'm coming this far, made this thing, and I committed. And Randy and I are going to talk on the top. It's going to be real fun. So I'm going to do it. So I go out and I get my ice axe and my poles, and I put my crampons on, and I head up the mountain. And uh, when I got about halfway up there's this thing called the 99 switchbacks. It takes you all the way up the trail, across about 13.9. And it's very steep, and it goes like this 99 times back and forth. And
Oh,
the snow had come across, and it was icy across us. It was pretty hairy in a couple of spots. And so I'm stomping, I think, and I'm going along, and I'm making it. And I get up right near the top. I'm up 13.5, 13.6, and I'm just a couple, and going over to Trailcrest, where because it's not flat, but it's an open thing, and it's fairly shallow. It's only about 800 feet over 2 miles from there to the summit, so it's an easy walk from there. So I was close to the crux being over, and just being a stroll to the top. Now it was motivating me to keep going, and I know when I could look right up and see it wasn't that far, and I'd come 3/4 of the more than 5/6 of the way, and so I'm going to make it. And so I'm walking along. And it's quiet, and crunch, 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 and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, without any warning, and a couple of times earlier, I had been hit by these winds that it came up and up and up and up and up and up and up, and it got so much, it was blowing sand, it was blowing snow, crystals in my face, and I would spread my legs and scrunch down and put my ski poles down and hold on, and it would gradually fade away, and then I would proceed on. But I got plenty of warning for this, and it wasn't, it wasn't going to blow me off the mountain. It was unpleasant, and so I kept on going. And so I'm going along on this, crunching along on the ice here, and with in this rocky there in this one spot, and without any warning. I mean, it was dead still, and all of a sudden this wind smacks me, and it's 80 miles an hour,
gee.
and it just takes me right off my feet and slams me down on my back on this rock. A tremendous impact.
Wow.
And I got these. You should see me. When anyway.
Wow.
So
Now,
I
okay, so you're slammed on this rock. Are you close to an edge that it could have blown you over the side and there'd be no more?
fortunately no, but if it had hit me in other places, I mean, there's places here where there's what we call on the mountains and on mountain the no fall zones.
Mhm.
Okay, a no fall zone is a euphemism. So if you slip, or you're going to die. That's what a no fall zone
Wow.
means. And there's no fall zones all along this. I've been climbing on where I look over the edge here, and it just drops straight down. And if you slip there, you could not stop. And you would go, and somebody did 2 weeks earlier than that. It was a college student, a graduate of Nebraska, a football player. And he died right where I was. And, he fell off. Now, I'm thinking to myself, perhaps he died because of a wind event like this as well. And there's not speculation that's what happened to him. But he didn't have eyesight. I had eyes. I had the full thing, and it just took me. I mean, slammed me down. Now, as you're asking, if it had been on one of these no fall zones, and it had hit, and the angle it hit me went back onto the trail, which was rocky, and had rocks sticking up out of the snow and the ice. If it had hit me at an angle, over on the no fall zone, which well is the trail zigs and zags, it could have easily been one of those spots, and there were lots of spots like that. And if it hit me there with the same angle, the same direction of the wind, would have knocked me off the mountain, and I wouldn't be having this talk with you today.
Jeez.
Um, so so I get up and I realize I'm not, nothing's broken, but I've got bruises. I've got really, and so, I've had this, we did a podcast once on what I call the red light, that
Right.
when people, get into a situation where they, well, this is getting scary, this is getting, whether you're climbing up a mountain or driving too fast or going in the dark or doing something stupid that eventually you have this, and I'm just a metaphor. A red light comes on in your head. In other words, your natural self-defense is saying to yourself, "I think we should stop here. I think we should go back. I don't think we should do this anymore. This is getting dangerous." The red light, it's been flickering up to this point. That when I'm pulling myself up off the ground, the red light is flashing and saying, "Get your butt down now." And so there was really no, I mean, I like to say, there's a temptation of people to try to take credit. I always, I turn back, nah, I mean, I was there and pushing it already. And this was not something that was negotiable. This was not a hard call. This
Well,
was,
I'm
this
glad. I'm glad you used grounded common sense. We'll call it that. That's awesome.
I even go that far, right? I don't want to give myself credit for that. I mean, it was a decision that was just not possible. It was not discretion. It was mandatory. There was no doubt about it. It wasn't a hard call. I can't go any further. It's just I'm going to die if I go further. And so I turned around and went back to the tent. And sure enough, it got worse. I mean, I got down to below, and the wind was, I mean, a couple times I had to get right down on my knees and hold on. And then I got to my tent, the tent had been, I had put 75-pound rocks and it had been blowing away. And then it was tipped up. I had to pull the rocks out and then knock in the stakes, and it broke the cords on my stakes.
So
I mean,
you had left your tent thinking you were going to go up, have a nice
I'm going to
conversation.
come back and spend the night at the tent. That's what I usually do. I go up, and it takes all day to go up and go back down. And when I get down, I'm too tired to break camp and go all the way. It's
Right.
it's 6 miles down to the, and it's steep and rocky and icy. And I'm carrying I couldn't do that. So it's more fun and easier. I mean, I could if I had to, life or death, but I go down, spend that night in the tent, and then get up and go down the next day. So I went down, and the wind was blowing to, I mean, I don't, it's hard for me to speculate what the miles per hour was, but it was, I mean, it was just screeching and slapping the tent all around, and lifting it up a couple times. And so it went on all night.
Did you get
And
any
so
sleep at all?
only a little bit,
Did you, I
and
mean,
so
were you able to fix anything to eat, or do you just have
uh,
granola bars at that point?
I could not get up and get the stove, and I just couldn't do it. And, I mean,
Yeah,
I don't think I could light the stove.
right.
The partner had a real difficult time lighting the stove. It's a propane stove before, and he had to get over and move it and get behind and whip some rocks around it because the wind was screeching. I couldn't have lit the stove. So
So at this point in time, you're getting in your tent. You are very happy to be there. You're looking for cover. The wind's blowing 80 miles an hour. You're exhausted. You're bruised. You're sore. You're alone, and you're just having the time of your life. What's wrong with you?
this is so fun. I'm sure you're just jealous that you weren't there. But I have a lot of food that, like edible, like I have these fruit bars and goos and chocolate and these sesame things. I have a lot of high sugar, high energy carbohydrate food. And so I just ate that and not, he had left me behind these wonderful soups and rice and chicken and dishes and stuff that you can boil and you pour it in a thing and it's delicious. I couldn't get the heat, so I'm in the tent, zip up the tent, and get through the night.
So at this
Screeching.
point in time, you have a radio phone. Are you in contact with your wife to let her know you're okay and what has happened, or what?
Yes, I have a little tiny device I've showed you in these past. It's called an InReach, and it's a Garmin device, and it connects you with the Iridium satellite system, and gives you the capacity to text people. And there's new models coming out, Randy, that will enable me to send you pictures, but they don't have that now. And it is not audio, so you can't talk on it. But you can text on it, and it has a couple other features. One feature is it has a tracking feature, which Mary insists I do, my wife. And so I put the tracking feature on so she can follow me all the way. She knows exactly where I am. Okay. And there's the text feature, and there's a forecast feature. And you push the forecast, it charges you $1.50, and it will send you an algorithmic forecast to your exact location.
We're going
Like
to get to this weather forecast here in a minute, but right now I need a break, and we're going to take just a short time out while I go and I think I'll overnight you some salve of some sort, but we're going to play some nice music here. And
I
everybody,
can
stay tuned as we continue to have Robert on the couch because he needs help. He needs a lot of therapy for getting himself in this and out of it. But we'll be right back. Stay tuned. We'll find out. I think he got off the mountain. Meh. Well, we'll see what happens next. We'll be right back.
Pumpkin pies cool on the windowsill. The fire crackles, the world stands still. The table's cleared, the stories fade, the season shifts in sweet parade, from orange and gold to silver and white.
Well, we're coming back, and Robert is still here. He is, as we know, bruised just a touch, but not his ego. And he is now, we have him in his tent. I want to find out how long it took him to or pack it back up and head back down the mountain, because all night all he could do is eat some crunchy bars and some fresh water out of the creek. I guess that's all you had, wasn't it, Robert? At this point in time, is just a canteen full of water, or
That's it. I had been up earlier, and I had them in thermoses to keep them freezing. And so I had that water that filtered out of the streams that were still coming down. They were freezing over, right? And they were I was a day or two more, the streams would be all frozen over, and we'd have to just try to melt snow or something. But let me go back to the inReach that I keep in my
right?
alone. And I explained that I can text it, and I can send algorithmic weather that will come right to my spot and tell me the forecast for 48 hours for $1.50, my spot, exact location. And it always has the tracking feature. But there's another feature that originally was the whole point of it, and that is it's an SOS. It has a button, a big button on the outside of it. And if you push that button, it beeps up an SOS to the Iridium satellites, and it goes down to a place called the Garmin International Emergency Rescue Coordination Center, which is in Houston. And it's a huge building with people speaking 200 languages in that building. And it monitors the whole world. I mean, people have boats, in Saigon, I mean, in Vietnam or India or something, and they need, emergency. They push it. It goes to this place in Houston. And so does, if I pushed it, and what it does is that they don't do the rescue. They have a database. Well, first of all, I register my device, and so they know who I am, what color my tent is, how old I am, what my blood type is, and my wife's phone number. They got all this information about me, and it beeps that up to them, and my exact location, and then it also tells them what search and rescue has jurisdiction over all around the world. There's these SARs, they call them, search and rescues. And this would be the Inyo SAR, the Inyo County Search and Rescue. And there's a bunch of volunteers and sheriff's deputies that do this, and they have helicopters and the whole thing. And if you push the button, they say, "What's the nature of your emergency?" Like a 911 call, and they relay that to the INYOSAR, and then the INYOSAR takes over the rescue, and they would call my wife and say, what's he wearing? What's he doing? How's he doing? As much as she could say, and they can communicate to me, and it Bluetooths to my iPhone, so I can lay in my sleeping bag and communicate through, hang it up on the ceiling, and communicate to my wife or SAR or whoever else I need to communicate with. And so, but they will come immediately and rescue me. And in the Sierra, it's amazing because they have all these helicopters and they have thousands of people always getting into trouble. And so there's the Yosemite SAR called YOSAR, and it's the most busy in the world. I mean, it maybe not be the most good in Europe. They use them all the time, and everybody buys insurance. And if you and people, you can push the button, they'll come rescue you with a helicopter. It's the same there. I mean, and these helicopters are going all the time, pulling people off the mountain, and rescuing them. And they even in Yosemite they perfected pulling people off these vertical walls. They lower somebody down and the helicopters up, and they go over, they swing them over, and they grab them, and it's quite a
Amazing.
skill it takes to do this in Yosemite. It happens all the time. And what it means is that if you're in one of those jurisdictions like Yosemite, but even here where I was on Mount Whitney, I mean, they would have somebody on me with a helicopter half an hour. I mean, or less. And I've seen it used. We talked about one of our earlier podcasts about how I was, with a group, and I was coming Mount Adams in Washington, and we came upon this accident where this young girl in a guided group had stepped off a cliff and fallen and smacked a hole in her head, and she was, and the guides were thinking of not calling, and I was with a doctor who was we had hired a guide, and we said, this woman's got to be out of here right now, and you better push that button or we're gonna, and the doctor said, I talked, and I said, you be the doctor and I'll be the lawyer because I'm a lawyer. And I said, "Look, you're never gonna practice. I'm gonna get, you're gonna get sued. So they, okay. So they all get, and we all gather around, they push the emergency, and we watch the whole process go through. What's the nature of your emergency? And the doctor says, we have a female, 16 years old, a severe, immediate evacuation to the nearest, trauma one, high-level trauma hospital. So within 30 minutes, here we are on the backside of Mount Adams, 100. There was it comes in, they land, they pick her up, they take her and land on the rooftop of Hope Hospital in downtown Seattle. There's a gurney waiting of doctors, take her down the elevator into surgery. In 20 days, she was back in high school fixed. They cut a thing in her hip and stuck it in her head and plugged the hole, and she would not have survived if it hadn't, and so this is what we have available. So I know that's my backup as I'm laying in the tent, but I'm bruised pretty bad. But I'm
So
okay.
you're in the tent. It's nighttime when you.
It's night. It got to be. It was dark when it gets dark early nowadays, and the wind is screeching, and I'm in there, and before I got in, I repositioned the stakes and pounded them in. It had broken the ties to the stakes. That takes these nylon things had been. So I got in the tent, moved the rocks out, sealed it back up, and tried to sleep as best I could in the slapping, carrying on thing. And so finally the next morning I pack everything up and I bring the pack into the tent, this little tent I have, this Himalayan mountaineering tent, it'll take anything, and packed everything up in there, and then go out and to take the tent down. And when I did that, the wind was so hard, a gust came. It ripped the tent up into the air and it swung it around in the sky, with one stake holding, and slung everything out of it that was in the
Oh,
tent. And
gee.
all these stuff bags, went flying off, some other stuff just flying off flying off. I never did get the bag, the stuff sack from my tent. It blew away. So I managed to grab it down and take the stakes out and roll it up and put it in rocks and put it in my backpack, and then went out and rounded up some of it. But so I'm gonna have to order some of this stuff, like this new stuff bag. So I managed to get in the tent and and put it all in my backpack, and put the backpack on, and then strike out. with a tracker on. And I kept Marion posted all this. When I was up there and it knocked me down, I got up and I said, I'm calling it. And I didn't want to worry her and say, I just said, the wind's
Right.
too high. I'm heading back down now. I'm calling it. And she was very relieved. And I said, I'll text you again when I get to the tent. Don't worry. So I went down to the tent, text her, I'm okay. So we go back and forth. And so then I call up and say, I'm leaving it. And then coordinate with my partner who's waiting for me at the trailhead.
Wow.
So he went down and he slept in his van. And he said, I'm here waiting for Robert. And what a wonderful guy. And so I start down and, it's about, I don't know, it's about 6 miles maybe. And it was steep and icy. And so I got this 50-pound pack on. I'm practically, but I made it back down. And then quickly, and then got in the van with him and text Miriam, I'm safe. But she was tracking me, I mean, she was calling him because I was down the canyon, there's no cell coverage. She was calling him saying, he's here, he's here, he's here. Because she was
How
following
many hours did it take to get from your camp to the van?
about 6 hours, I
Wow.
mean, there were places where initially the snow was just snow, and you wouldn't need anything, you could just walk it. And then it's the physics of it as it consolidates down. The surface of the snow gets harder and icier and icier, and at
Right.
some point, it's micro spikes. I had micro spikes, and I had crampons, and the micro spikes are like this. They're very comfortable. They're light. You put them on your feet. They have great purchase. They're fabulous. And then at some point, as this physics process goes on, and this thaw and freeze at night, with the ice gets thicker and thicker and thicker. And finally, the spikes won't have enough purchase to hold you if it's steep enough angle, and you'll slip off. So you have to switch over to the big spikes, the crampons. So I was going around something. It is just solid ice. And so rather than put the crampons on and off, and I was just climbing around some of these things. And that's why it took me 6 hours, And then finally I got down below where it was, and it was going around the trails and stuff. And I sent you a picture of my iPhone that shows the number of miles I went each day. It's quite a lot more than it would
So
because I'm like this.
what's going through your head over the 6 hours? Like, I want to survive, another step, or you're thinking your thoughts of life, or listening to any music, or it's adrenaline just saying, I just want to get to the bottom. I mean,
I'm an experienced climber. I knew I was going to get to the bottom, and I knew it was on a trail. And what I was thinking to myself is that the great majority of accidents happen on the way down. Why? People let their guard down and think, well, I'm
right.
done. I get to the top. I'm done. I'm safe. You're not safe. You're not safe till you get in the car. And so what I did is I kept telling myself, you're not going to die here. I mean, you're not even going to get really, but you could slip and fall and break something. You could hurt yourself. You could shatter an elbow.
Sure.
Go slowly and be careful. Take it easy. Don't fall. You're going to make it. Take it very slowly, one step at a time. Be safe, and go around the stuff. Don't throw yourself off. And so I was taking it, and I'm climbing around, and I'm just taking it so that I can avoid the steepy ice parts. I go slowly. Be sure I move one thing at a time. A leg. I mean, a stake, a foot, a stake, a foot. So only one of my 4 points that I'm in the ground is moving at a time. Only it's a 3-point holding, one moving. And I kept that process going. And there were long stretches, it was just dirt. And as you get lower and lower and lower, there's less and less and less snow until finally the last couple of miles, there's no snow on the road, on the trail, it's just dirt. And so you have these long straightaways at the very end, and you can just fly on those things. And so I did. So I get back down, and my partner is asleep, laying in the driver's seat. And I knock on the window and say, "Hey, can I have a ride back?"
What time of day is this?
This is about 3 in the afternoon.
Wow.
And so he jumps up and he comes out and opens the card thing, and I put my stuff in, um, and so we get in the car, and he says, you want to spend the night someplace? And we talked about. I said, no, let's just go home. And so and we did. We just drove straight home. And it was about 7.5, 8 hours with gas and everything. And I generally try to be a vegetarian sort of ish guy, but I, I eat chicken and I eat some other things, but I have this love of steaks, and so after something like this, there's this place called Harris Ranch, and it's
Yeah.
on Interstate 5, where it's halfway between LA and San Francisco, and it is, have a big ranch there with thousands of head of cattle, and so it's this notoriously good steak place. So I said, I want to go to Harris Ranch and I want to have a filet mignon. That's going to. So he drove me to Harris Ranch. And we had a filet mignon, and I said, I'm buying because you went through all this trouble for me. And so we had a wonderful steak dinner there, and then he drove me right to my door, and I arrived back safely. So um, Whitney has about 2 to 5 fatalities every year, and they typically arise from the same old, same old. It's the same with general aviation. I had an airplane, and they publish. The FAA keeps they have a preliminary investigation on the final of every accident. An accident is fine is anything that costs more than $25,000 in damages to an airplane or an injury, a serious injury. And so you can sign up for your airplane that you own, and they will send you the preliminary and the final of every accident. And you can bet people pour over these things because this is not abstract talk about people wagging. This what actually hurting people. This is why people are dying. This is what's killing people. This mistake. Don't do that. And that's the most valuable. They have the same thing in the mountaineering. They have a publication called Mountaineering Accidents in North America, and it's published by the American Alpine Association. And I get it, and I got it before this thing, and I read all these accidents all over the United States. And what it tells you is not abstract, it's not hypothetical, it's not, this is actually what caused people to die. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Look at what the circumstances were. It's the same stuff over and over. Like with general aviation, 18% of all fatal accidents are caused by somebody, this in the general aviation, the little planes, running out of gas,
Oh.
thinking. And the same thing in the mountains, the same old, same old. People going up there with no crampons or spikes and no ice axe and walking on packed snow. And at some point in the packed snow, if you slip, and your shoes will slip at some point as it gets steeper, and you will slide down, and you won't be able to stop, and you'll just pick up speed until you crash into the rocks and die. This is the number one killer in the mountains. And it happens over and over again. And people put up, and they put it in the websites, they put it everywhere. Don't go up here without crampons and ice axes or spikes and know how to use it for a rest. You take the sharp end, you put it down, and you fall on it a certain way, you can stop yourself. You practice arresting your falls. They go up without it, and they go out, and I've seen it happen. I mean, I came upon teenagers that were up and they slid down, and I had to call 911 on my cell phone. And they sent up a helicopter to get them, and they fell because they didn't have, and so that's the number one killer. But of course, there's the cold. People go up without, so they go up at night without adequate gear. They get lost in the mountains, and of course, lightning, Randy, kills a lot of people, and it kills them on horses. But it also, you have 2 places people die in the U.S. of lightning: golf courses and mountaintops.
Right. Well,
That's where the lightning is. And I've been up in the mountains, and you see this lightning coming at you in a thunderstorm. And I was one time on this mountain called Round Top near Tahoe, and it was like strike, and I was with my son. We ran down and climbed into some cave under the rocks there, and the lightning was just booming and slamming all around us. But I didn't want to be the highest thing, because that's where because you're the highest thing when you're out
right.
on golf, and so that's another killer. And of course, there's hypothermia, which is freezing to death, and a lot of people go up in the mountains, and they don't take adequate clothes, and at night, when you're over 10,000 feet up there, you're over 12,000, it goes down 20, 30 degrees in 2 hours. It doesn't do that at sea level. I mean, it just, when the air is thin, it can't hold the heat. When the sun sets, the temperature just plunges down. And so what they're walking along the daytime, and they think, oh, it's not so bad. I mean, I'm warm, and I got my jacket here. And once the sun sets and it gets really cold and put it on, it's not nearly enough. And so you have to have very special gear. And the other thing is that we have this technology today, and I have it in my apps on the phone, and everything. It tells you where you are, and it has the trail. You have All Trails and Gaia and these other apps and then we'll show you, will geolocate you on the trail. Here is the trail. Here's where you are. See that little thing? And you can't getting lost if you have it is a thing of the past. I remember Daniel Boone, remember the king of the wild frontier, when they ask him, you ever been lost? He says, nah, I've never been lost. There was sometimes for 3 or 4 weeks I was a mite confused. And
I
but
always wondered about Lewis and Clark when they went on their voyage, how they went out and came back, and I
well, they
mean,
had a compass. They had a compass, and
they're
in my early youth, I mean, Magellan and Columbus navigated around the world, and all they had was a wet compass. That's it.
amazing.
And what I used to do along all the other is I had these USGS geologic maps, there were terrain maps, what do you call them? Show the elevation, and you had a compass, and you tried to figure out looking around, and you used the compass and the map, and that was it. And that doesn't work when it's you're up on the rock because you can't see the trail, and it doesn't work if it gets really foggy or you're on the snow and there's no trail, you can't find it. So there's a lot of times when it's very risky to be out. So the GPS thing on the phone, I mean, that has solved, because many times when I was on Williamson, there was a big stretch of the trail that went on the rock, and at night I was coming down in the night, and I couldn't see the trail, I couldn't follow it. And so I get my thing, and I'm just following along, over these cliffs and rocks, following my on instruments. When you fly an airplane and you get in the clouds, you use your instruments, because you can't see, and so
Right.
you rely on instruments and your GPS, and you fly the airplane. That's what I did with it. That's what everybody does. And so a couple of times I've been up. I was up, with my dog at a place called Maud Lake near in Desolation Wilderness. And this guy comes along to me. I'm at my camp, and he can see me from the trail. He comes down. He says, "Please help me. I'm lost." And I said, "Well, just I'll take him out to just follow this trail." "Oh no, but where does it go?" And he goes on and on. And I think to myself, "What is this guy doing up here?" I mean, I said, "The mountains on this side. Look over here. There's no mountains. Keep the mountain on the left. Follow this trail and take it right to the parking lot. It's 4 miles down the road."
Wow.
And he said, "No, come." And I went with him for a little bit, and I said, "No, you got it. I just stay. Mountain on the left. And." Well, so there are people up there in the mountains who get lost. And if you get lost, what you're supposed to do is stay put. But they go wandering off, and they get, and they go off the trail. And when rescuers come, they can't find them. And that's why these rescue things like on the Jeep is so critically important.
Right.
Because in the past, it was a lot of searching and not much rescue. It was mostly recovery of bodies, and that's because, it's a vast area up there. And how are you going to find somebody? People don't realize how big these mountains are, and how, if you go off the trail, it's virtually impossible to find somebody. It's you've got to stay on the trail where you're staying, and stay where you are when you get lost, and don't move. And they don't do that. And don't go up there if you're not have adequate
Well,
navigation.
Robert, we gotta bring this to an end. So where is your next great adventure? What plans do you have? I'm sure you're not retiring from climbing mountains.
No, I'm not requiring, and these things happen, and I was able to, uh, handle it, and I think I can handle it. But what happens, I live in California where, 12 months of the year, there's some place that's in its peak and it's perfect, and in January in Death Valley, the average high on the golf course there in Furnace Creek is about 70 degrees, and it's balmy and sunny, and so I can switch, when the snows come in the Sierras at the high altitude, I simply pivot. And in fact, I made plans on this trip to pivot to do a peak in Death Valley. If the snows came and it got me, and I had the car and everything, I could just pivot, and that's what we call it, and go to the other alternative. And so my next one is a peak called Saline Mountain. It's only 7,000 feet, but it's 7,000 feet in the Death Valley National Park, and it rises from 2,000. So it's a huge mountain. It just rises from a very low spot. And it's It's got a slot canyon on the way in, and it's just absolutely, and you have
Well,
this
Robert,
incredible view.
the time goes too quick. I know we've got some other things we have to do and talk about on our other shows. All those things people believe that just ain't true. I'm sure we're gonna take a gander at that in the next week or two because oh, I just don't even want to go into it anymore. This last week while you were gone, the Supreme Court had a nice open communication about the Trump tariffs, which you might want to catch up on and see that. It was very fascinating listening to the Supreme Court and all those things. That's why Robert goes mountain climbing. He just likes to get away from it all. It's just he brings us all down to the world of reality and our other see, we're just golfers. We don't know any better. We just, we go out and we
It's
find our
wonderful to go up into these great granite cathedrals and this is my and commune with nature and to see this moon at night
I'm
and this.
glad you're safe and healthy, my friend. I will wait for our good friend Robert Aldrich to get back. He's going to be back this next week from his big adventure to Turkey, Greece, and Italy. And I'm sure he and Judy I know they've had an amazing trip because during that time there was a 6.1 earthquake, of course, in Turkey when they were in Turkey. So they safely got out of there. And I said, "Hey, Robert," and this is a good friend of ours. I said, how'd that earthquake bother you? And he goes, "Huh? What earthquake?" So it's like, I forgot they were on a cruise ship. I don't think they felt it, but it was quite fun. I appreciate you sharing the time with us today, Robert. You're an amazing guy. Been doing this living large, and everybody know that Robert has an amazing life out in San Francisco. He's a tour guide for groups, all volunteer to tell people about the history of San Francisco, gold rush eras, and all kinds of different things. And a very big consumer advocate, still an attorney at heart, but is retired, helped out many people, and just he's had a life where he's always thought about other people first and not himself. So I'm glad you and your wife have reconnected, and I'm glad as she is that you made it back home safe. And we'll look forward to the next great adventure in Death Valley. And Robert, thank you very much for spending the time today.
Thank you, Randy. Looking forward to that next week.
Well, and everybody else always remembers my grandfather always said, just leave a better footprint, just like Robert did all the way up and down that mountain, because you never know who's watching. And tune back in. Golfers Golf and Travel is going to be coming on with actually a golf-focused show within the next 2 or 3 days. And we're going to be looking at this past year, the highlights, the lowlights, what's coming up in the world of golf, in amateur women around the world, professional men, amateur men, and what's going on in the DP Tour, and what the New Year's looks like in the world of golf. It's going to be an exciting one coming up in 2026. So, a lot going on here. Stillery Channel Media LLC says thank you, and tune back in next time. Hopefully Robert will be safe. Coming back from Death Valley. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Leave a better footprint. Oh, leave a better mark. It's the love in your words that'll light up the dark. I've walked green fairways and dusty back roads, chased sunsets from here to the sea.